in the stillness of a candlelit room, as the world outside falls quiet, let us drift back in time to a young land newly born from revolution, trembling with hope and guided by men whose names would echo through the ages. This is the story of the first presidents of the United States, told softly so you may fall asleep with history in your heart.
George Washington, the first president, 1789 to 1797. He was born on February 22nd, 1732, in a quiet corner of Virginia. George Washington was not born into greatness. He grew into it. A young man who loved the land, who measured his worth not in wealth, but in honesty and in service. He became a soldier, his boots stained with the dust of battle. Through storms and winters, he led an army of farmers, blacksmiths, and dreamers. They called him General Washington, but he never sought glory. He sought only freedom. When independence was won and the 13 colonies became a nation, the people turned to him again. In 1789, he took the oath as the first president. His hand upon the Bible, his heart steady with duty. There was no palace, no crown, only the hum of a new republic and a man who chose to lead, not to rule. He built the foundations of government, established the cabinet, and helped shape the Constitution into living truth. When 2 terms had passed, he stepped down, peacefully, gracefully, teaching the world that power could be given up, not clung to. Washington retired to his beloved home, Mount Vernon, to live among his gardens and memories. He passed away in 1799, at the age of 67. The nation wept, for its father had fallen asleep.
John Adams, the voice of independence, 1797 to 1801. Born October 30th, 1735 in Massachusetts, John Adams was small in stature, but mighty in mind. He was a lawyer, sharp with words, unyielding in principle. He believed in truth above popularity. He defended the rule of law, even when it made him enemies. During the Revolution, he stood beside Jefferson and Franklin, helping to shape the Declaration of Independence. When the nation took its first breath, Adams became its second president. His years in office were troubled, divisions among his own people, tensions with France. But through it all, Adams held firm to peace, refusing to draw the young republic into war. In 1801, he left the White House quietly and returned home to Quincy, Massachusetts. Years later, on July 4th, 1826, as fireworks filled the sky for the nation's 50th birthday, John Adams whispered his final words. Thomas Jefferson still survives. He did not know that Jefferson had died just hours earlier. Two founders, leaving this world on the same sacred day.
Thomas Jefferson, the dreamer of liberty, 1801 to 1809. Born April 13th, 1743, in Virginia. Thomas Jefferson was a man of words, music, invention, and ideas. He wrote the Declaration of Independence, not as poetry, but as promise. All men are created equal, he wrote, with trembling hope. As president, he expanded the nation westward, buying the vast Louisiana territory from France in 1803. It was a bold act, one that doubled the size of America. He sent Lewis and Clark to explore the wild frontier, to map rivers, mountains, and dreams. At night, Jefferson would sit beneath candlelight, writing letters, designing buildings, playing the violin softly to himself. He believed in simplicity, in knowledge, and in freedom of thought. In 1809, he retired to Monticello, his hilltop home. There he wrote, read, and dreamed until 1826, when he passed away, on the same day as Adams, the 4th of July. Two old friends reunited in eternity.
James Madison, the father of the Constitution, 1809 to 1817. Born March 16, 1751. A quiet man with a giant mind. James Madison was small and soft-spoken, but his thoughts shaped a nation. He helped write the Constitution, the very soul of the United States, and the Bill of Rights, ensuring the people's liberty would never fade. When he became president, he faced war, the War of 1812 against Britain. The White House itself burned, flames painting the night sky. But Madison did not surrender. He endured, and when peace returned, America emerged stronger, its identity reborn in the ashes. He left office in 1817, returning to his Virginia estate, Montpelier, where he lived quietly until 1836. He was the mind of the Republic, the gentle architect of freedom.
James Monroe, The Era of Good Feelings, 1817 to 1825. Born April 28, 1558. A soldier of the Revolution, a diplomat, and a calm presence in restless times. He gave the nation the Monroe Doctrine, a promise that the Americas would remain free from the reach of European empires. His time in office was peaceful, prosperous, a time of unity. They called it the Era of Good Feelings. He traveled across the country, greeted by cheering crowds, symbolizing a nation grown confident. Monroe left office in 1825 and passed away 6 years later on July 4th, 1831. Another president who left this world on the nation's birthday.
John Quincy Adams, the Reluctant President, 1825 to 1829. Born July 11, 1767, the son of John Adams. From childhood, he watched his father fight for liberty. He learned languages, traveled across oceans, served as a diplomat in Europe. When he became the 6th president, he dreamed of roads, canals, and universities, a modern, connected nation. But politics was harsh. His vision was too grand for his time. In 1829, he lost the election. Yet, unlike others, he did not retire. He returned to Congress as a humble representative. There, he fought for education, for freedom, and against slavery. In 1848, at his desk in the Capitol, he collapsed. His final words, "This is the end of earth, but I am content."
And so ends the first chapter of America's long and winding story. From the courage of Washington to the wisdom of Adams, the dreams of Jefferson, the reason of Madison, the steadiness of Monroe, and the conscience of Quincy Adams. 6 men, 6 lights in the dark, guiding a fragile nation toward tomorrow. Sleep now, with their whispers in your ears. History is not noise, it is the heartbeat of time. Soft, steady, and eternal.
As the sun of a new century rose, America stood at a crossroads, growing, changing, dividing. The young republic had survived its birth, but the world ahead would test its soul. These next leaders, from Jackson to Lincoln, would guide a nation through storms of politics, through progress and pain. Let us begin gently, with a man of fierce will and restless energy. Andrew Jackson, the People's President, 1829 to 1837. Born March 15, 1767, in the Carolina frontier. A boy who lost his parents young, a man forged by hardship and war. They called him Old Hickory, tough, unbending, a soldier who led his men through the War of 1812 and emerged a national hero after the Battle of New Orleans. When he became the 7th president, the people cheered, for Jackson was not from the elite. He was one of them. He believed the voice of the people was stronger than any title. But his leadership was fierce, sometimes ruthless. He fought the National Bank, believing it favored the rich. He signed the Indian Removal Act, a dark chapter that forced thousands from their lands. The Trail of Tears. Jackson's legacy is tangled: courage and cruelty, strength and stubbornness. He left office in 1837, retreating to his home, the Hermitage, where his legend and his controversies still whisper across American history. Martin Van Buren, the politician's politician, 1837 to 1841. Born December 5, 1782, in New York, Van Buren was a master of politics, a quiet strategist, smooth, polite, clever. He helped Jackson build the Democratic Party and became his chosen successor. But fate was cruel. Soon after he took office, a great financial panic shook the nation, the Panic of 1837. Banks collapsed, businesses failed, and the people suffered. Van Buren was blamed, though the storm was not of his making. He served one difficult term and left office with grace. History remembers him as the craftsman of American politics, a man who understood power, but was humbled by its burden. William Henry Harrison, the briefest presidency, 1841. Born February 9th, 1773. A war hero of Tippecanoe, Harrison was a symbol of frontier valor. He campaigned as a man of the people, living in a log cabin, drinking cider, or so the story went. He won the election in 1840, but destiny had other plans. On a cold March morning, Harrison gave the longest inaugural speech in history, over 2 hours, without a coat or hat. 1 month later, he died of pneumonia, the first president to die in office. His term lasted only 31 days. A life that burned bright and vanished too soon. John Tyler, the accidental president, 1841 to 1845. Born March 29th, 1890. When Harrison died, the nation was unsure. What happens when a president falls? Tyler answered simply, "I am the president." He became the first vice president to step fully into the role. Tyler faced storms of politics. His own party rejected him. His cabinet resigned. He stood alone. Yet he achieved much, pushing for the annexation of Texas and defending the idea that the presidency was an unbroken office. Tyler left the White House in 1845, unpopular but resolute. In the Civil War years, he would side with the South, a decision that haunts his legacy. James K. Polk, The Expansionist, 1845 to 1849. Born November 2nd, 1795, in North Carolina. A quiet, determined man, Polk believed in vision, not fame. He promised one term, and in that time he would transform the nation. Under his leadership, the United States stretched westward to the Pacific Ocean. He oversaw the annexation of Texas, the Oregon Territory, and victory in the Mexican-American War, which brought California, Nevada, Utah, and much more into the Union. But expansion came at a cost. Debate over slavery deepened, and new borders brought new divisions. Exhausted, Polk kept his promise. He served one term and died just months after leaving office in 1849 at only 53. Zachary Taylor, the Soldier President, 1849 to 1850. Born November 24th, 1884. For 40 years he served in the Army, fighting in distant wars, a simple man of duty and discipline. They called him Old Rough and Ready. He became president as a war hero, though he had little political experience. Taylor opposed the expansion of slavery, a brave stance in dangerous times. But only 16 months after taking office, he fell ill and passed away in July 1850. Another leader, gone too soon.
Millard Fillmore, the Quiet Compromiser, 1850 to 1853. Born January 7th, 1800. He rose from poverty, a self-taught lawyer, a patient man. When Taylor died, Fillmore became president. He sought peace between North and South, signing the Compromise of 1850, which temporarily cooled the fires of division, but allowed the cruel Fugitive Slave Act, forcing the return of escaped slaves. It was a choice he believed would save the Union, but it only deepened the pain. He left office in 1853, his legacy complex, conflicted, and quiet. Franklin Pierce, the Gentle Tragedy, 1853 to 1857. Born November 23rd, 1804, in New Hampshire. Handsome, charming, and deeply sorrowful. Before taking office, he lost his young son in a train accident, a grief that shadowed his every day. As president, he tried to unite the nation, but his decisions only widened the divide. He supported the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which allowed slavery to spread westward. Violence followed, bleeding Kansas, a sign that civil war was near. Pierce left office quietly, his heart broken, his reputation in ruins. James Buchanan, the last before the storm, 1857 to 1861. Born April 23, 1791, Pennsylvania. A lifelong bachelor and a man of diplomacy. He had served as ambassador, senator, and secretary of state. But when he became president, the country was on the edge of chaos. Southern states threatened secession. Buchanan believed compromise would hold, but the Union was already cracking. When Abraham Lincoln was elected, state after state left the Union. By the time Buchanan's term ended, the Civil War had begun. He left quietly, saying only, "I am the last president of a united country." Abraham Lincoln, the great emancipator, 1861 to 1865, born February 12, 1809, in a Kentucky log cabin, a man of simple beginnings, a boy who read by firelight and dreamed of justice. Lincoln was tall, humble, thoughtful, a voice of reason in a nation tearing apart. When he became the 16th president, the Union was already at war with itself. He bore the weight of every death, every mother's cry, every field soaked in blood. But he never gave up on the idea that America could be reborn, whole and free. In 1863, he signed the Emancipation Proclamation, declaring freedom for enslaved people in the South. His words at Gettysburg still echo softly through time. That government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. In April 1865, just as peace was near, Lincoln was shot at Ford's Theater. He died before dawn, and a nation wept like never before. He was gone, but his dream endured. From Jackson's fire to Lincoln's light, the story of these presidents is the story of America growing, from conflict to conscience. Through courage and failure, they shaped a land still learning what freedom truly means. History whispers to those who listen, and tonight it has spoken softly to you. The Civil War was over. The guns had fallen silent, but the echoes remained. A nation was broken, its heart heavy, its people uncertain. Now new leaders would rise, some to heal, some to build, some to simply endure. Let us drift back to the days after Lincoln's death, to the men who carried his shadow. Andrew Johnson, the accidental heir, 1865 to 1869. Born December 29, 1808, in North Carolina. A tailor by trade, self-taught, stubborn, proud. He was Lincoln's vice president, a Southerner loyal to the Union. But when Lincoln was killed, Johnson suddenly became president. He faced a shattered country. The South lay in ruins, and millions of freed slaves looked to Washington for hope. But Johnson was no Lincoln. He opposed harsh punishment for the South and resisted equal rights for freedmen. Congress turned against him. He became the first president to be impeached, though he survived removal by a single vote. His term ended in silence. He left Washington, a man defeated by history itself. Ulysses S. Grant, The Soldier of Peace, 1869 to 1877. Born April 27, 1822, in Ohio. Quiet, steady, a man who never sought fame, but won glory as the general who ended the Civil War. The people saw him as a hero, a man of honor. When he became president, he promised to rebuild the Union. He fought for the rights of freed slaves and crushed the Ku Klux Klan. He stood for peace and unity. But politics was cruel. Corruption spread around him, not by his hand, but by those he trusted. Grant's heart was pure, his judgment less so. When he left office, he was tired, but loved by many. He would later write his memoirs as he faced death from cancer. A quiet, noble farewell from a man who had seen too much.
Rutherford B. Hayes, The Honest Rebuilder, 1877 to 1881. Born October 4th, 1822. A soldier, a lawyer, a man of calm integrity. He became president after one of the closest elections in history, a contest decided by a single vote. They called it the Compromise of 1877. Hayes withdrew federal troops from the South, ending Reconstruction. A peace at a price. He sought honesty in government, education for all, and healing for a divided land. He served only one term, then returned home quietly, content to fade into the soft pages of history.
James A. Garfield, The Tragic Reformer, 1881. Born November 19, 1831, in a log cabin in Ohio. A scholar, preacher, and general. He believed in justice, education, and opportunity. But just months after taking office, he was shot by a man angry over politics. For weeks, he lingered in pain. Doctors tried to save him, but infection set in. He died September 19, 1881. His presidency lasted only 200 days, but his ideals still glow, faint and pure. Chester A. Arthur, The Gentleman, Unexpected, 1881 to 1885. Born October 5, 1829, in Vermont. He was Garfield's vice president. Once known as a political insider, a man of the old system. But when Garfield died, Arthur changed. He became a reformer, signing the Pendleton Civil Service Act, which replaced corruption with merit. He surprised everyone, perhaps even himself. Arthur suffered from illness and did not seek a second term. He left quietly, his dignity restored.
Grover Cleveland, the Honest Democrat, 1885, 1889, 1893, 1897. Born March 18th, 1837, in New Jersey. Calm, stern, truthful. He believed government should serve the people, not politics. Cleveland fought corruption, vetoed wasteful bills, and kept the nation's money sound. He married in the White House, the only president to do so, to Frances Folsom, graceful and much younger, who became beloved by the public. But his honesty sometimes made him unpopular. He lost re-election in 1888, only to return in 1892, the only president to serve 2 non-consecutive terms. During his second presidency, the country faced depression and unrest. He left weary, but unbroken, a man who valued truth over favor. Benjamin Harrison, the Grandson's Legacy, 1889, 1893. Born August 20th, 1833, the grandson of William Henry Harrison, a lawyer, a Civil War officer, and a man of faith. As president, he strengthened the Navy, protected American industry, and admitted new states, North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, and Washington. But his policies raised costs, and the people grew restless. He lost re-election to Cleveland, the man he had defeated before. A circle closed by history's quiet hand. William McKinley, the Modernizer, 1897, 1901. Born January 29th, 1843, in Ohio. Warm, kind, dignified. He led the nation into a new century, an age of electricity, invention, and empire. Under McKinley, the U.S. won the Spanish-American War, gaining Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines. The nation stood taller, but not all were proud of its power. He spoke gently, governed wisely, and was loved by many. Then, in 1901, while greeting visitors at a fair, he was shot. He died days later. His last words were, "It is God's way, His will, not ours, be done." Telescope Roosevelt, the Lion of Progress, 1881–1909. Born October 27, 1858, in New York. Energetic, brilliant, unstoppable. He was the youngest president in history, only 42 when McKinley died. They called him Teddy. He loved life, mountains, rivers, horses, battles, books. Roosevelt believed in fairness, for the people, for nature, for the world. He broke big monopolies, built the Panama Canal, protected forests and wildlife, and gave America its modern spirit of power and confidence. He said, "Speak softly and carry a big stick." But his heart was kind, his laugh thunderous, his energy endless. When he left office, the people cheered his name as if he were a legend, because he was. From the ashes of war to the dawn of a new age, these presidents built the bridge from the past to the modern world. Through loss, courage, and reform, they carried the light of Lincoln into a new century. The story of America is a story told not in power, but in perseverance. And tonight, you have heard it whisper in the quiet voice of history itself.
The new century had arrived, with its shining cities, its factories, its endless noise. America had grown powerful, but power brings questions, and not all dreams are peaceful. Now begins the story of presidents who guided the nation through the fire of progress, the storms of greed, and the shadows of war. Let us begin with a gentle man of great size and quiet heart. William Howard Taft, the gentle giant, 1909 to 1913. Born September 15th, 1857, in Cincinnati, Ohio, a man of wisdom, warmth, and calm dignity. He never wanted to be president. His dream was to be a judge. But his friend, Theodore Roosevelt, urged him into the White House. Taft loved law, not politics. He trusted fairness more than fame. He continued many of Roosevelt's reforms, but his calm ways angered the bold progressives. When Roosevelt returned and challenged him, their friendship broke, a wound that never healed. After his presidency, Taft finally found peace as Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, the only man to serve in both offices. He died happy, knowing he had at last reached his true calling. Woodrow Wilson, the Professor President, 1913 to 1921. Born December 28th, 1856 in Virginia. A scholar, a thinker, soft voice, deep conviction. He spoke of peace, of morality, of a world guided by reason.
Under Wilson, America reformed banks, taxes, and trade. He gave women the right to vote and fought for fairness in labor. But soon, the world went dark. In 1914, war consumed Europe. By 1917, America joined the First World War. Wilson led with faith, believing it was a war to end all wars. Millions served, thousands died. The world changed forever. When victory came, he dreamed of peace, a league of nations to end conflict forever. But Congress refused. His health broke. He suffered a stroke and faded from public life. He had seen both the best and the worst of mankind. Warren G. Harding, The Man Who Smiled, 1921 to 1923. Born November 2nd, 1865 in Ohio. Tall, handsome, charming, a man who made people feel at ease. He promised a return to normalcy after the storm of war. People adored him, but power hides shadows. His friends, his cabinet, his Ohio gang were filled with greed. Corruption scandals, the Teapot Dome, and others would soon stain his name. Harding died suddenly in 1923, before the truth fully emerged. Some called him kind, some called him careless. History called him tragic. Calvin Coolidge, The Silent President, 1923 to 1929. Born July 4th, 1872, the only president born on Independence Day. Quiet, honest, reserved. They called him Silent Cal. Coolidge believed government should be small and people should be free. He lowered taxes, balanced the budget, and watched America bloom, an age of jazz, cars, and rising wealth. But beneath the music, danger was growing. Stock markets rising too fast, fortunes built on dreams. Coolidge left office in peace, but soon the crash would come. He died quietly in 1933, the sound of a broken decade echoing just behind him. Herbert Hoover, the President of Hard Times, 1929 to 1933. Born August 10th, 1874, in Iowa. An orphan who rose from nothing to become a world hero, feeding millions during war. When he became president, he was beloved, strong, capable, honest. Then, in 1929, the stock market crashed. Factories closed, families starved, banks failed. The Great Depression had begun. Hoover tried to help, through loans, projects, hope, but it wasn't enough. People blamed him for the suffering. They built shanty towns and called them Hoovervilles. He left office heartbroken, unjustly remembered as a symbol of despair. Yet history knows he was a good man in an impossible storm. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the voice of hope, 1933 to 1945. Born January 30th, 1882, in New York. Cousin of Theodore Roosevelt, but his own man, with a smile that calmed the world. Stricken by polio, he lost the use of his legs, but never his will. They called him FDR. When he took office, America was broken. Banks had failed. Farmers starved. Dreams had vanished. He spoke to the nation through the radio, his fireside chats. His voice was warm, steady, human. He gave the people what they needed most: hope. His New Deal built bridges, dams, jobs, and security. He gave America a future again. Then came another storm, the Second World War. Roosevelt led not just a country, but the free world itself. He met with Churchill and Stalin, forged alliances, and dreamed of peace beyond war. He was elected 4 times, more than any president before or since. But his health was failing. On April 12, 1945, as victory neared, he died quietly, a cigarette in hand, a nation in tears. His last words, "I have a terrific headache." And then silence. But his voice, his courage, his promise that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself,
still echo softly in the hearts of millions. From Taft's kindness to Roosevelt's fire, these leaders carried America through the rise of industry, through depression, through war. They turned pain into progress and gave the people faith when faith was all they had left. History does not sleep. It breathes in every whisper, every name, every dream that endures. The war was ending, but peace had not yet begun. The world stood in silence as cities burned and nations mourned. A new century of power was awakening, one forged in fire and tested by fear. This is the story of presidents who walked between destruction and destiny, who held the fate of the world in their trembling hands. Let us begin with a man who never expected to be president at all. Harry S. Truman, the reluctant leader, 1945 to 1953. Born May 8, 1884 in Missouri, a farmer, a soldier, a simple man with clear eyes. When President Franklin Roosevelt died suddenly in 1945, Truman, then Vice President, for only 82 days, was thrust into history. He was told about a secret weapon, a bomb, so powerful it could end a war and change the world forever. In August 1945, he made the hardest decision any human could make. The atomic bombs fell on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The war ended, but the world was never the same again. Truman carried the weight of that choice for the rest of his life. After the war, he rebuilt Europe through the Marshall Plan and helped create NATO, a shield against Soviet power. He also recognized the new nation of Israel and stood firm during the Berlin airlift, when freedom itself hung in the balance. He left office humble, returning to Missouri without wealth or fame, only the quiet pride of doing what he thought was right. A farmer again, but one who had seen the end of the world. Dwight Eisenhower, the General of Peace, 1953 to 1961. Born October 14, 1890, in Texas. The man who led the Allies to victory in World War II. Now he led his nation in peace. They called him Ike, and America loved Ike. He built highways, schools, and the dream of a middle-class life. Children played. Families bought homes. The 1950s felt safe, steady, and strong. But beneath the calm, the world trembled again. The Cold War had begun, a silent battle between the United States and the Soviet Union. Eisenhower believed in strength without war. He warned of a growing danger, the military-industrial complex, the fear that power could turn against peace. He left office in 1961, old, wise, and deeply respected. He had seen the worst of war and gave his people the gift of quiet years. John F. Kennedy, The New Frontier, 1961 to 1963. Young, handsome, charismatic. He spoke with light in his eyes. When Kennedy took the oath, a new generation felt alive. He said, "Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country." His words lifted a nation. He dreamed of exploration, of equality, of courage in the face of fear. But his time was one of danger. In 1961, the Bay of Pigs invasion failed. In 1962, the world came closer to nuclear war than ever before, the Cuban Missile Crisis. For 13 days, the world held its breath. But Kennedy chose diplomacy, not destruction. He spoke to the Soviet leader, Khrushchev, and peace returned, fragile but real. He promised a man on the moon. He spoke of civil rights.
He dreamed of unity. And then, on November 22, 1963, in Dallas, Texas, the dream was shattered. Shots rang out. The world froze. John F. Kennedy was gone. But his words, his hope, his voice still echo in the silence. He showed the world that youth could lead, that courage could shine, and that dreams never die. Truman carried the weight of war. Eisenhower carried the peace. Kennedy carried the dream. Each stood in the shadow of history and turned it toward the light. They built highways and hope, faced bombs and fears, and still believed in freedom, in progress, in the human spirit. The world was changing fast, and the next presidents would face the storm of civil rights, Vietnam, and the race to the stars. But for now, let the night be still. Let their stories rest, and may their dreams light the path ahead.
The dream of Kennedy still lingered in the air, when a nation found itself suddenly without its shining star. The voice that once said, "Ask not," had been silenced, and into that silence another man stepped forward, reluctant, heavy-hearted, and burdened with destiny. His name was Lyndon B. Johnson. Lyndon B. Johnson, The Burden of Greatness, 1963 to 1969. Born August 27, 1908, in the Texas Hill Country. Tall, forceful, relentless. They called him LBJ. He had risen from poverty to power, and now stood where Kennedy once stood. The country mourned. The people wept. And Johnson promised to carry forward Kennedy's dream. He declared a war on poverty. He signed the Civil Rights Act of 1964, ending segregation in law, though not yet in hearts. He signed the Voting Rights Act, the Medicare Act, and brought more change to everyday American life than almost any president before him. But there was another war, far away, in the jungles of Vietnam. At first, it was small, then larger, then endless. Night after night, television screens filled with images of smoke, fire, and loss. And America began to question not only the war, but its own soul. Johnson spoke softly once. "I will not seek and I will not accept the nomination of my party for another term as your president." He stepped away, heartbroken, knowing he had done much good, but that war had taken too much. He died in 1973, watching his nation still struggle between progress and pain. Richard Nixon, The Rise and the Fall. Born January 9, 1913, in California. A man of contradictions, brilliant, complex, cautious. He ended America's direct role in Vietnam, visited China, opening doors no one thought possible, and sought peace with the Soviet Union. The Cold War began to thaw, but a shadow followed him. A break-in, a word, Watergate. It began small, a political spying scandal, but it grew into a storm. The nation listened to tapes. They heard the truth and the lies. In 1974, for the first time in American history, a president resigned. He boarded a helicopter, raised his hand in a final wave, and left the White House in silence. Richard Nixon's legacy, a mixture of achievement and tragedy. He gave the world diplomacy and left behind a wound in democracy. Gerald Ford, the healing president, 1974 to 1977. Born July 14, 1913, in Nebraska. He was never elected president or vice president, but destiny chose him. When Nixon resigned, Ford took the oath. He said, "Our long national nightmare is over." He granted Nixon a pardon, not to forget the past, but to help the nation move forward. He faced economic troubles, inflation, and doubt, but he brought honesty back to the Oval Office. They called him clumsy, but his heart was steady. He was a man of simple decency, trying to heal a wounded land. He left quietly in 1977, his brief presidency, a bridge between corruption and renewal. Jimmy Carter, the farmer of faith, 1977 to 1981. A peanut farmer, a Navy man, a quiet soul of compassion. He spoke softly and smiled sincerely. He promised honesty. He promised peace. He believed in human rights, in kindness as strength, in diplomacy over power. Carter brokered the Camp David Accords, bringing Egypt and Israel to peace, a moment of hope in a region of fire. But the late 1970s were hard. Oil crises, inflation, hostages in Iran. Americans grew frustrated, and Carter's calm tone was lost amid the storm. Yet, beyond his presidency, his true legacy grew brighter. He built homes for the poor, fought disease, and became a global symbol of moral leadership. History would one day see that sometimes the kindest leaders shine longest after the lights go out. Johnson fought for justice. Nixon sought power and lost it. Ford healed the wounds. Carter brought compassion. 4 men, each facing storms of war, scandal, and crisis. Yet through them all, the nation endured. The flag still rose each morning. The dream still whispered at night. History is not made only by victory, but by persistence. And so, America continued into the uncertain dawn of the 1980s, where new voices, new dreams, and new challenges awaited.
The 1980s began with uncertainty. A weary nation, burdened by inflation and haunted by lost faith. But then came a voice, calm, confident, and full of conviction. He spoke not as a politician, but as a storyteller,
and his story was about America's return. His name was Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan, the great communicator, 1981 to 1989. Born February 6, 1911, in Illinois. A former actor, governor, and dreamer. When he became president, he promised a new morning in America. He cut taxes. He rebuilt the military. He believed government should get out of the way and let people chase their own destiny. He called the Soviet Union the evil empire. And yet, he would be the one to end the Cold War. He met Mikhail Gorbachev, the Soviet leader, and together they reduced nuclear weapons and built the first fragile bridge between two superpowers once sworn to destroy each other. In 1987, standing before the Berlin Wall, Reagan spoke the words that shook the world. "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." 2 years later, the wall fell. Freedom, at last, spread through Eastern Europe. But Reagan's years were not without shadow. The Iran-Contra affair, the rise of inequality, and a growing national debt. Still, when he left office, he smiled and said, "It's morning again in America." He faded from public life, later facing Alzheimer's disease, a slow, gentle sunset for a man who once lit up the world. George H.W. Bush, The Quiet Strength, 1989 to 1993. Born June 12, 1924, in Massachusetts. A World War II hero, a diplomat, a man of dignity and calm. He watched history unfold as the Soviet Union collapsed and the Cold War ended. The world was changing faster than ever before. He sent American forces to Kuwait in the Gulf War to drive out Saddam Hussein's army. In a few short weeks, the war was won. His words after victory were humble. "By God, we've kicked the Vietnam syndrome once and for all." But at home, a recession came. He had promised no new taxes, yet he raised them for the nation's good. It cost him dearly. In 1992, he lost re-election. But even in defeat, his grace made him beloved again. He would later become the father of another president, a rare chapter in American history. Bill Clinton, the global president, 1993 to 2001. Born August 19, 1946, in Arkansas. Young, charismatic, brilliant. He represented a new generation, a time of computers, the internet, and globalization. The economy boomed, jobs grew, the world felt open and connected. He signed the NAFTA trade deal, balanced the budget, and left America with prosperity. But scandals followed him, personal, political, and deeply human.
In 1998, he was impeached for perjury and obstruction, but not removed from office. He survived, scarred but standing, and when he left in 2001, America was rich but divided. History would judge him not just by mistakes, but by how he faced them. George W. Bush, The Age of Fire and Fear, 2001 to 2009. Born July 6, 1946, in Connecticut. The son of a president, he began with laughter and ease, a folksy Texan charm. Then everything changed. September 11th, 2001. The towers fell. Smoke filled the skies. The world held its breath. America had been attacked. Thousands were gone, and a new war had begun. Bush stood before a grieving nation and said, "I can hear you, the rest of the world hears you, and the people who knocked these buildings down will hear all of us soon." The war on terror began in Afghanistan and later in Iraq. He promised democracy, but war brought chaos. Hope turned to doubt. Hurricane Katrina struck. The economy wavered. Yet, through it all, Bush stood firm, believing history would one day understand. When he left office in 2009, the world was weary, but a new voice was rising, one that spoke of hope. Barack Obama, The Dawn of Hope, 2009 to 2017. Born August 4th, 1961, in Hawaii. A lawyer, a teacher, a poet of politics. The first African-American president in the history of the United States. When he took the oath, millions wept, not for politics, but for progress. He inherited crisis, the Great Recession, 2 wars, and a wounded spirit. But his words were calm, his tone inspiring. Yes, we can. He passed the Affordable Care Act, ended the Iraq War, and ordered the mission that brought down Osama bin Laden. He spoke often of unity, of listening to one another again. He faced challenges, racial tension, division, and cynicism. Yet he carried himself with grace and patience, a symbol of how far the nation had come. When he left office in 2017, his approval high, his smile gentle, his legacy was clear. He had reminded a weary world to believe again, to believe in hope. Reagan ended a war of fear. Bush H. steadied the peace. Clinton embraced the world. Bush Jr. faced the storm. And Obama brought the dawn. 5 men, 5 chapters, one long, restless journey through power, pain, and promise. From the Cold War's chill to the warmth of new beginnings, America learned again and again how fragile and how strong a dream can be. The story does not end here, because history never sleeps. It only whispers, waiting for the next voice to carry the torch forward.
The world had changed. Smartphones glowed brighter than candles. Tweets traveled faster than thoughts. And truth became something harder to find. Into this modern storm, a man stepped onto the stage, loud to some, fearless to others, impossible to ignore. His name was Donald J. Trump. Donald Trump, the age of disruption, 2017 to 2021. Born June 14, 1946, in New York City. A businessman, a showman, a name written in gold and lights. He had never held office before, but he spoke the language of anger and ambition, and millions listened. His campaign promise was simple: make America great again. He won in 2016, a victory that stunned the world. His presidency was like no other. He cut regulations, changed trade deals, clashed with allies, and spoke directly to the people, through his phone, through the screen, through unfiltered words that echoed everywhere. The economy grew strong until the year 2020. A silent enemy arrived, invisible, merciless. The COVID-19 pandemic. Hospitals filled, streets emptied. Fear and confusion spread faster than the virus itself. Trump faced criticism, praised by some for his defiance, blamed by others for his tone. In those same years, a new wave of protest rose across the nation. Black Lives Matter filled the streets, demanding justice, demanding equality, demanding to be heard. The country seemed to divide, red and blue, truth and doubt, fear and frustration. And then came the election of 2020. Amid a pandemic, Americans voted in record numbers. Trump refused to concede. He claimed fraud. And on January 6, 2021, a mob stormed the U.S. Capitol. A dark day in democracy's story. In the end, his term ended, not with applause, but with questions. Yet millions still saw him as a fighter, a man who spoke what others would not. He left the White House on a cold January morning, but his influence still lingers, like thunder echoing after the storm. Joe Biden, the healer, 2021 to present. Born November 20th, 1942, in Scranton, Pennsylvania. A man of empathy, of grief, and of perseverance. He had run before and lost,
He had buried his wife, his daughter, and years later, his beloved son Beau. Yet, he never gave up. When he took the oath on January 20th, 2021, the Capitol still bore scars from the riot. The air still carried fear from the pandemic. He promised one thing: to bring unity. We must end this uncivil war, he said softly, between red and blue, rural and urban, conservative and liberal. His first days were filled with action, vaccines, economic aid, and rebuilding alliances abroad. He rejoined the Paris Climate Agreement, withdrew troops from Afghanistan, ending America's longest war. But that withdrawal was chaotic and painful. Inflation rose, prices climbed, and the dream of unity remained distant. Yet Biden's tone stayed steady, fatherly, patient, as though speaking not to enemies, but to children in pain. His presidency remains a work in progress, a bridge between generations, between past wounds and future hope. Trump brought the noise. Biden brought the calm. Two men, two visions, both reflections of one restless nation. From Washington's revolution to Biden's restoration, the story of American presidents has always been the same. A story of power and imperfection, of mistakes and miracles, of men trying to steer a country that never truly sleeps.
History does not end. It circles back, whispering through time, reminding us that leadership is not about crowns, but about courage. And so we close this chapter, 8 parts, 2 centuries, 46 voices, each one a heartbeat of the American dream.